Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about values, and this is going to be contentious because I want to name this episode like "Your Core Values Are Garbage."
Yes,
like something real catchy, like that, something like that. Your core values are crap. And yeah, I put something on LinkedIn because as I was doing some research for this, I came across companies' core values, right? And I was looking them up, and I'm like, okay, let's see what some of these things say. And they were shockingly identical.
Right.
And so the LinkedIn post had, I don't remember, it was like McDonald's and Starbucks and ExxonMobil and M&T Bank.
Right.
And then I had their core values listed, and they're like identical. Integrity, honesty, excellence, blah, blah. The other one's integrity, something else, integrity, something. I'm like, okay, so you guys are exactly the same. Like all your values are exactly the same. And you can't tell me McDonald's and ExxonMobil value all the same things. They obviously don't. They do business differently. They're making different decisions. So your values aren't like, they're worthless at that point, right? Like it's just nonsense. So I started thinking, how in the world did we get here? Like where does this come from? That like you got to pick 4 to 7, words that are going to be adjectives that are your core values now,
right.
and that's like what you're supposed to do. Like that's common advice you're gonna hear out there. Mm-hmm. So I started looking into it, and I didn't know this, but the whole idea of these core value statements started and it really gained traction in the late 80s and then into the 90s.
Okay.
So in the 90s, we started to really have a lot of this, like, hey, every company has to have a core value statement now. It was like boilerplate. Like you're not in business if you don't have some sort of core value statement in the 90s. So
right.
When I traced this back, what I kind of saw was we had the 80s saw a lot of these leveraged buyouts. You had the age of the leveraged buyout through the 80s, and then huge global consolidation into the 90s.
Right.
So we ended up with, there was some articles I was reading from Harvard Business Review in the 90s about the end, quote unquote, the end of competition, as we get these huge mega conglomerate companies, and you'll have every industry has like 3 companies that handle all of it. It's like a monopoly in every industry and whatever. So with the emergence of these giant mega corporations, they started to notice that there was a big problem, like the dehumanizing elements of those giant companies. And they're just bureaucratic monsters. And so to combat that, a lot of these companies started going, hey, we're going to adopt these we're going to put out these values as sort of an internal and external marketing mechanism to say, hey, we're not the evil empire. We're still humans. Look at us. We're just like you. I mean, we're ExxonMobil. We're exactly like your local gas station. You're like, are you though?
We're basically like the rebellion.
Yeah, right. So that's where that rooted in. Like that's where that really got rolling. Okay. So this still doesn't explain why they're all the same though, because you'd still think, okay, it would be totally different. Like you're going to sit around, if you're in the boardroom at ExxonMobil and you're in the boardroom at McDonald's, like you should come up with significantly different things that you value. Like how are you making decisions? What are you valuing?
Yeah. Like gas versus cheeseburgers.
Totally. So you're not really, they were all, anytime that I see something where it's almost, 100% the same across the board, across time, across different cultures or whatever, it's something to do with human nature. Like it's something about us that we're seeing. It's not hey, I sat around with our best people and we came up with our values and these are our unique values. So what I started to notice was, okay, let's look at core value statements across the world.
Okay.
Are they all the same? And they're not. So if you look in the United States, you tend to center around like individual behavior and achievement.
Right.
Individual. Yep. The integrity is on almost every single one because we want to be individually integrous. Each one of us is like, we're an upstanding, solid, whatever. But then you look at China And a lot of the core values center
Unity.
around saving face and
Wow.
and sort of respecting your elders
Yeah.
and respect and that kind of thing. If you look at the Middle East, indirect communication. I had no idea. I was like, really? That's and then in India, family is huge. Like they like seeing like the workplace as an extension of a family. So the core values in each of these like different and I'm sure there's more. You go into probably every subculture and
Sure.
across the world. So what these core values are doing is just simply reflecting the context of the culture in which that
Hmm.
company primarily exists.
Yep. Right.
So if that company operates primarily in the United States, its core values are going to be boilerplate United States. Hey, this is America, and here's our values, and we're just like you guys.
Right.
And so then all the companies there are going to be sort of similar.
Yes.
So what does that mean for us? To me, the core value now stinks of rotten, bureaucratic, giant corporation trying to look like a person and trying to trick me into thinking that they care about whatever those words are. And see, I'm just like you. And so to me, I don't want any part of that. Like I'm rebelling right now. I'm making the statement that I'm rebelling against the core value statements of 4, 5, 6 words that are going to be like integrity and honesty and hard work and blah blah blah, whatever the thing is. Because now I'm hearing that, and every time I see that, all I'm seeing is, oh, it's a giant corporation that doesn't give a darn about anything.
Right.
Now, it doesn't have to be a giant corporation. It could be a small company that wants to be like a giant corporation that doesn't give a crap about anything.
Right. Okay.
So I'm thinking that we've crossed over, right? I think we're right on the precipice of crossing over into these are now detrimental.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if I have like candidates come in to look at our company, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, no, we have core values. Oh, the guy who works, just worked at Walmart,
Right.
they have core values, and then they come to our place and like, oh, the couple of the same core values here, and I just worked at Walmart and I thought that sucked. So obviously you guys value the same sorts of things that suck, or you're trying to trick me into thinking that you care and you actually kind of suck.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm full on off of that. That's done for us. We're not doing
Wow.
any of that.
Okay. I love it.
Do you though?
That's great. I'm convinced so far.
So okay, so you have to replace it with something like
Right.
the main idea of what I think we should be trying to communicate with these is how you literally value different outcomes and different behaviors and are going to make decisions based on that hierarchy of values.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
it needs to be telling you.
And that's what I see it. And I think there's probably people that try to utilize their 6 words to it's particularly smaller companies that try to do that. But yes, I think it's a grid through which you're filtering decisions and that type of thing.
It should be, yeah. And so to me, there's a couple things that were kind of unique. I think that it has to be a hierarchy. I think they have to be arranged in an order, not just like, okay, so if you looked at your words, okay, integrity and honesty, which one ranks first? Pit those two against each other, and then which one do you pick? Because there will come times in business where you have two competing things that are both good, and you have to decide between them.
Right.
And I think being able to have an understanding of yourself and your company and how you're making those decisions and communicating that hierarchy to people of like, no, this is how we're going to make these decisions so that there's no question. When people come to you, your people are like, they don't have to wonder, hey, how's Andy going to rank this over this? Like, are they going to rank this higher than this other thing? And they'll know it's right there.
Right.
So it has to be a hierarchy, and it has to be like central to your decision-making process. Otherwise, they are just adjectives. And most of them, and I may have sent you this, if you look up company values, typical company values, and it's going to provide you a list. And then you look up ethics. Give me a list of ethics. They're almost they're identical. They're almost identical.
You mean things that we view as ethical.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you'll see honesty, integrity, respect, fairness, inclusion.
Huh.
Those are all ethics.
Right.
It's descriptions of ethical behavior. And that is what we've grabbed to call values.
Yeah.
They're not values. They may still find a place as like, hey, you're going to perform your business ethically. And that's still a great and admirable thing, and that's important. But it's not how you are valuing your potential decisions that you're going to be faced with.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm curious as you bring, just hold your thought because I think you have more on that vein as well. But, and you may disagree with this, but I would say, there's probably certain ways in which our company or our culture is lacking in some of those ethical areas more potentially than in, say, maybe 100 years ago, where it was more just ingrained in people. And I wonder if as the natural kind of ethics has gone down culturally, if we're trying to like artificially I don't know, bolster that by like, no, honest, be honest. And everybody's like, yeah. I don't know.
Right. No, I think you're probably right on. Like you didn't have to shout out. Like if we went back, 60 years and talked to our grandparents or something. My parents, your grandparents.
Hey.
and no, we were like there was an assumption of these things, like when you would do business, there was an assumption of like this ethical behavior. You didn't have to say it, and just the fact that you're having to say it probably means you're lacking in it.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to put integrity on my wall. You just act integrous.
Yes.
You just do things with integrity, and people
Yeah.
will know that that's what you are.
It's like putting like American on your wall. You're like,
Yes.
no, actually, we are.
Yeah. Just be the thing. No, I think you're absolutely spot on. Yeah. So
continue on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think it's still important to like talk about ethics and ingrain those into your business and demonstrate ethical behavior and not accept anything unethical in your business. Like absolutely.
Right.
You got to be really, strict about that, but you don't have to put them on the wall necessarily. You can sort of describe characteristics of your business. Things like compassionate and brave, excellence, service, friendly, that's like how it is, how your business, the personality of interacting with your business. But again, still not values, but they get conflated. They get all put into this value thing.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, you could have like, what's the brand experience I want people to take away? But that
Sure.
doesn't necessarily, although that might somehow factor into your decision making, it's not necessarily going to be your actual
Right.
values or hierarchy.
Right. So the funnest portion of this, and maybe we can get to all this in one thing. I went through and I looked at Chopin Pest Solutions after talking to Pete a few weeks back, and he had his values, right? And he talked about 7 values. He had a team come in and they came up with what they were going to do, and I kept thinking like, okay, those are cool qualities and things that you want to live by and whatnot. But if we were to look at in this new view of values, how does Chopin Pest Solutions, how did they make their decisions? I came up with a different set of values than what he outlined. Because I couldn't really put together like, okay, how does that litany translate into the decisions that you made?
Right.
And they didn't. So here's what I did. I think, and he said this several times, and this is just based on observation of how his business operated from what he said and reading his work. Number 1, I think their number 1 ranked value, quarterly residential services.
Yep.
He probably said that 10 times,
Right.
And so I think that under quarterly residential services, a sense of urgency to maximize the growth of quarterly residential programs. That was probably the overarching number one value there at the company.
Mm-hmm.
And he had urgency. He had sense of urgency as one of his things. Actually, I think that was the first one. Sense of urgency was their number, because it starts with S, right? It's spelled Chopin. But it's an urgency for a specific thing. It wasn't just a sense of urgency to run around in circles. Like we're urgent to go buy new truck tires. Like, no, there's not urgent. There's urgency for quarterly residential services.
Yeah.
Going to prioritize that. I think the number two thing in their value system was, and he loved this one, and this one I think he was right on, and I think this is why he loved it so much, operational integrity. So for them, it's being nimble, compassionate, honest, and consistent in their service delivery. So the nimble, compassionate, honest, consistent, all those things were words that they had in their values. Those were all, I included those in there, but it was all those things described how they were going to do things. So their decisions were going to be based on, first, selling residential services. Second, providing those services with a high degree of integrity. So if you had one of these to win, that might be a tie. Maybe you might flip them. He might say, operational integrity first. Quarterly residential services might be second, because you might give up a job that you could get without operational integrity. You could sell another quarterly service. So maybe our quarterly services should be number two. But these are the kinds of battles that you'll have, right? You'll put these two opposing values together, and then which one do you favor? Some people will favor the sales value over all else.
Right.
They'll say, selling quarterly services is absolutely top. I don't care about everything. Yeah, operational integrity is good, but it's a distance too. And then I think the third for him was employee experience. He would make decisions based on providing a good employee experience. So they prioritize opportunities to create passion, enthusiasm, and coaching with listening to the staff. All things that he mentioned, words that they used in their thing. But I think those are the three. And I think in rereading this, I might flip one and two. I would say probably one, operational integrity. Number two, selling quarterly residential services. And number three, employee experience. He's going to rank any decision in the business against these three core values. And then you know which way he's going to decide based on where these rank.
Right.
And so I feel like that is a more true representation of the values of that company, of what they actually value. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Did you just do those three? Do you have more for Chopin?
That was that was three. Now for really us, we had we had more for ourselves. We ended up with 5. I did yours, and I ended up with 3 again. I wasn't trying to shoot for 3. I was just trying to think of what are you demonstrating through behavior? Because language is behavior is a language, and you're telling the most honest story about yourself in what you actually do. Yeah,
and it's interesting when I see you break this down. I think certain aspects niche down. Like the quarterly residential, you're like, well, that's out of left field. Who would have thought to put that as a core value? But I think that's great because, many of the interactions I've had with Pete, like that was their thing. And so I think that's great. But then you see, I think with like the operational integrity and the employee experience, where those don't niche down, those actually generalize, which is kind of, it's kind of more helpful because you can take a lot of his existing core values and bundle them in, which I think those can be, in terms of like helpful decision making tools. It's just interesting how sometimes you're going more micro, sometimes you're going more macro. But that's great.
Well, and it's very unique to the character of his company, because I don't have employee experience, barely even ranks for me. Right? Like we're not doing like barbecue cookouts, and we don't like, that's not part of like our vibe, right? That's not part of our culture. It's not how we're geared. It doesn't mean that we're right and they're wrong. It's just he was prioritizing that employee experience, having parties and giving out prizes and doing fun games and whatever. When I hear that, I recoil. I'm like, I definitely don't want to work there. right? Like just not because it's a bad place, just like I don't want to like go to parties. I don't want to do any of that, right? And that's okay. Our personalities come through it in how we build our businesses, and I think that's part of very like a Chopin Pest Solutions sort of unique kind of thing. So you
Yeah. And I think another thing that comes to mind, and I know Pete's written about it and communicated it, but even how he grew his company, he said he always overstaffed everything
yeah,
because he never wanted to worry about not being able to go out really quick to an account. And so instead of like trying to kind of maximize profit, like would be a core value for, some other companies, which would be just fine.
totally.
That he probably probably for all those reasons, he overstaffed so that he could hit more quarterly residentials, have great operational integrity, and have a good experience for the team.
Yeah, and that's amazing because yes, those things that you'll hear somebody kind of come back to over and over again play out in each one of these because you're absolutely right. You would overstaff because that's better for the employee experience. It's better for operational integrity. You can get out to customers. It's better to be, you can fulfill that sense of urgency to get out to sell that next quarterly. You can, we got somebody today, we got them there, right? So I feel like that's, if you were to redo these values in this idiom, this is, I think it kind of nails it. So
yeah, it's really interesting. And the thing I like about this whole framework that you've kind of built out is it doesn't smack of any of the same big corporate kind of lingo. It's like, like I said, some of them, they almost feel a little bit core values they're meant to be very like ethereal and sort of Gnostic, right? And these, they almost start getting, you're like, this starts sounding a little bit like, I don't know, like you're gonna really put quarterly residential, but it's such a helpful.
Yeah. No, it's for real. Well, I think a lot of them feel like currently the style we tend towards now is like you have like a cup full of dice that have words on them, and you just dump them out, and you're like, pick 5. There you go. Those are yours.
They all have the same words.
It's all the same, like couple words, right? You're like, okay, those are your core values. You're like, oh God. Well, and I think playing into this for smaller operators, you're seeding some of your most precious advantages.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing into a Me Too, and I don't mean like the Me Too thing, but like the Me Too, like I'm just like a big player or whatever. You're like, yeah, no, be who you are. Don't just play that game. Look different, feel different to your people and to your customers, and there you'll be more successful. Don't just fall in line and just start marching the way the way everybody else is. So I did yours as well.
Let's do it. I'm terrified, but oh man.
So now in like 2 years of talking to you,
you should know me pretty well.
I kind of, and you can shoot these down, like totally like be brutal. If you're like, nope, that is totally wrong. I did the same sort of thing, and I went round and round on this. But I came up with number 1, and these are completely different. When I did this, it's not like I tried to like match something. What I tried to do was I was trying to think like Pete Chopin, and then I was trying to think like Gabe Seymour, right? Like how is their business actually running, and what are they about? I think that the number 1 thing for Pest Patrol's core value is love your neighbor. So number 1 value that you make decisions on, love your neighbor, pursue services and practices that add value to the lives of our customers and community.
That's a lot more gracious than what I would have said my top core value.
Okay, you don't think it's accurate?
Let's keep going, and we'll see what your other ones
We'll see how it all plays out. Yeah, because they all work together, right? So I think that's the primary. That's like, why do you get up in the morning, get out of bed, and go to work to do like important work and get your hands dirty and put your boots on in the morning? That's
totally
why.
Yeah. I think about like some of the like dirty hands, clean money branding
Yes.
that we did early
Yes.
on and all that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
Sure.
central. It's central.
Yeah.
And I wanted to leave it open because I don't think that you want to, like where I feel like Pete Chopin's was quarterly residential services. It's like you said, a little confining, but in a good way. It differentiates them. Where I don't
Yeah.
feel like you're as confined in your thinking of, hey, this business could be a pest control business. It could also be insulation. It could also do this other thing. And all those things have one thing in common, and it's serving people.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's being able to provide whatever work needs to happen to serve the community and serve the customers and serve your people. Number 2 plays off of that. Work is good. Grow the business in order to provide rewarding work for many for years to come.
Wow. That's great.
So I feel like that was one that I thought a lot about because when I heard you were going, hey, I'm going to go to $1 million. We're going to be $1 million next year. My first thought and my first question to you is why? Why $1 million? I kind of challenged you on that. And I thought about it for a while because I was like, okay, why is Gabe going to push in that direction? And I think it's that growing the business so that you can provide those jobs, those good, rewarding jobs for people. That like, okay, the only way we can do that is we can grow and be profitable, and then do that for more people. And it serves both those masters.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. And then number 3, I had share your light, seek out opportunities to share success and lift up others. That I feel like
Wow.
you can't have something where you look at Gabe Seymour and pest control and how you value things and not include reaching out, turning around and giving back and reaching out, because there's no way you are involved with social media and posting things and doing a podcast and doing all this stuff. There's this, I have a responsibility if I'm loving my neighbor and providing good work for my people and then turning around and giving back to everyone else. And I think those 3 things are more motivational and instructive of how you make your decisions than like a bunch of random words.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your feedback?
Golly. I'm blushing over here. That's great. Yeah, I would a couple sort of big picture concepts that I was thinking through is, a big reoccurring thing for me is like legacy, like long-term building.
Yeah.
I do think that ends up fitting into a lot of this. Yeah, and like I've really, especially like this last year, I've been really focused on, like you said, trying to explicitly just like grow the company, just scale the company bigger. So I was thinking through words of how to describe that doesn't make it sound so mercenary.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, those are really helpful. Those are really helpful categories. So I love it. It's great.
Now, would you rank them differently? Like I think with Pete Chopin, I kind of erred, and I think operational integrity is over quarterly residential services. But I don't know with you if I goofed up the order on that.
Yeah, that I mean, I would say on like totally pulling the veil back, transparency as a business owner, I would say that the scaling side, the sort of work is good part, I would put as probably my primary goal, as just like existence as a business owner right now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, it's complex. One of the reasons is obviously monetary for me and for my legacy and that side, but a lot of it is really just like I just a couple months ago I just hired another kid. He's helping with crawl space stuff, and our crawl space and attic space stuff is blown up. largely because I've been like, I need to get this guy hours. And so I've
Yeah.
just been out selling my socks off. So that's a huge motivator for me, is just helping, making sure that my team has hours, that their families are fed. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that's such a cool, you experience that. It just, as
Yeah.
you grow, you get to see that more and more, like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited for the day when I can, have like a branch manager that's,
Yeah.
making like a career wage, that type of, I'm just,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm stoked to write that check.
Right. Right. That's awesome. So the growth motivator is really a relationship, like having growing relationships,
Yeah.
having that person that you're providing a career sort of path for, and that
Yeah.
kind of thing, as opposed to a like just a number on the bottom of the P&L.
Yeah, and it ends up, they're so related, because I was out with this kid doing a crawl space clean out with him, and I was at this customer's house, and we've done like rodent control out there. Um, we signed them up. We're doing, I think, quarterly rodent stuff, and then they had previous crawl space damage, so we helped them sort through that, and I was out doing that, and I was like, we were able to jump on this job super quick because I had this extra guy.
Mm.
And I was thinking through the implications of like how, if you have more team members and more capacity, you can love your neighbors when they're like, "Hey, can you help with this?" And you're like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Yeah.
So it's weird how, I mean, using this type of framework, how interconnected those things are.
I went round and round on these ones. Holly was like, "What are you doing, you psycho?"
Well, yeah, it's super helpful. And then even, for me, as like, I'm a Christian, so reaching out to people and just loving them, and that sort of sharing your light, like bringing others into the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
along the journey, and teaching them and mentoring them and all that stuff is like
Yeah.
huge. That's one of the things I love about business,
Right.
is you get like all those things
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
able to do at the same time.
Yeah. Holly made fun of me because of the language. She's like, "This sounds exactly like some Christian guy's gonna like it." I was like, "Well, I mean, that's it's kind of where we're at
Yeah,
here."
I'm kind of that guy.
Kind of that guy.
Yeah, it's
Oh my,
great.
oh my
It's
God.
great.
Did I tell you ours?
No, I want to hear him.
Okay.
So did you like redo yours again now as you're thinking through this, or?
I redid them this fall. I've been working on it. Once I realized that this was a bunch of garbage, because we've had a couple different ones. We've probably had 4 different iterations of like service theme, value statement, mission, vision thing, all the different things. And they always annoyed me because they just never captured anything like meaningful to guide us and like to point to. And so I was like, I never really had it, put together like this. And I've never heard somebody putting it into a hierarchy of like a decision making hierarchy of what you value.
Right.
So I don't know if we just kind of like coined this now, or if this is a thing out there that we're just not aware of. I don't know, but it seems to work for us. So I'll tell you the story of this one. I'm putting these together, right? And I usually I'm sitting in a little recliner at home watching whatever, kids are watching shows and stuff, and I got my little tablet and I'm always writing on there, and scribbling things and rewriting and drawing conceptual models of stuff of how your culture works, and all this nonsense. And every once in a while I subject poor Holly, my wife, to it, and I'll be like, "Oh no, look at this," and I'm all excited. And she usually just rolls her eyes and it's like, "Okay, hon, that's
Let
great.
me watch the show.
Yeah, just let me watch zombie house flipping, okay?" So I was doing this, and I came up with kind of our core values, and then I saw that I was like, "Oh wow, this could be a really interesting put into a metaphor." And so our core values, I'll give you them right off, and then I'll tell you how the metaphor was and what her response was. So for us, our decision making since day one, the most important thing has been income and operational stability.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, we have made our decisions from the very first, from the jump, based on stabilizing income in our operations. Like
Yep.
that has been the most important to us. I've probably said it over the 2 years we've been talking 1,000 times. Like the most important thing to us is not growing big, it's staying okay. Like coming from, a poor background and struggling to get this off the ground and whatever, you like that's the most primary thing.
Totally.
And so we favor anything that's going to provide that. And that led us into commercial, monthly
Right.
maintenance, doing that account-based work. I know I can count on it. Every single month I'm going to have that that paycheck, right? So we still have that mindset. Employee well-being was right there number 2. So my whole thing was once we had a stabilized business was I wanted to provide for employees. I wanted to provide jobs for people, jobs that I liked. I wanted to do that for other people. Number 3 is profitable growth. We're actually interested in profitable growth, but only after we have, or I guess I should say, subjugated to stability and employee well-being. We're
Right.
not going to sacrifice the well-being of the employees or the stability of the company for the sake of growth. Growth is going to be down. It's third down the list. Fourth, and it requires profitable growth to do this, is employee development and advancement.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to make decisions in the interest of advancing our employees' careers, and that could be advancing them out into something new. That's fine, but helping those people move along. I have a very, very strong interest in helping people grow. Like that's super important to me. Holly has said a bunch of times, she's like, you should have been a freaking therapist. But like, I really want to help people advance. I love seeing them start in one place, not realize they can achieve something, and then help them realize it, and off they go. And then the last one is industry advancement. Is that turning back towards the industry? That's why we invest in the lab and doing research projects, and we want to really see, involved with the association and things like that. Like I love the industry, I want to see it advance, and we're gonna dedicate towards that. But this, so I'm looking at this and I go, this would be a really cool metaphor of like the stability and operational stability of the company is our primary, and that's like the soil that we're based on. That's the bedrock. And the employee well-being is like the roots of this tree, this oak tree. And the profitable growth is the trunk of the tree that rises up out of the ground and brings us up. And then the employee development is each one of these branches that shoot off in different directions. And then at the very end, you have the flower, the fruit of the tree. That's the industry advancement. And her face got so red as I'm saying this, redder and redder. And then she just bust out laughing right in my face. She thought it was the stupidest thing she's ever heard. She laughs right at me. I was like, okay. So you don't love it, do you? I was like, oh,
man.
Thanks a lot. That's the support I get.
Tell Holly she needs to read more poetry. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. She doesn't like that whole thing.
That's so funny. Yeah, I like it. I like the I don't know if I would tell any of your employees that. But no, just kidding. No, that's good. Okay, so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because I just happen to have Pete's written down, mine in the middle, and yours, and I just put them all. Does it make a difference? So Pete's are quarterly residential services, operational integrity, and employee experience. Yours is, stable income, employee well-being, profitable growth, employee development, and then industry advancement. With mine, they're more concepts or statements. Love your neighbor, work is good, share your light. I wonder, is that going to be detrimental? Because I see... I actually really like it because I'm thinking that more, I don't know. I think in statements, like that.
I think you think in larger emotional ideas.
Yeah.
I think that and that's why I framed them that way. Is that I feel like the larger concept that is encompassed with like an emotional idea, and then you build around that and go in that direction and interpret it in different ways in different contexts. Where I feel like Pete, I feel like Peach Open's more like I am. We're a little more analytical, and we'll tend to like want data on things and compartmentalize things in a little square box a lot more.
Yep.
And I feel like if we were to paint, Pete and I would probably paint by numbers, and you'd like finger paint, right? Like a little bit. Not
I'm
that
like
either one's
dumping
right.
the buckets on
You're
the
just
wall.
like shooting it on the wall. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's why I kind of use that language and then put some like subtext with them to kind of explain.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, because it's interesting because that probably actually accurately depicts, I think you're right, how I tend to think of things, and then also probably where my weaknesses will lie.
Mm.
That I'm, and I've already recognized it, that like down the road, I'm gonna need to get a um much more detail oriented kind of person, because
Yeah,
it's so not me.
right.
And I recognize that will probably down the line hamper the growth of the company if I'm not
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah, and that's gonna be hard too, right? Like, because you're gonna have to find someone that's the right person that you trust. I got really lucky that Holly and I complement each other very well professionally. So like
Mhm.
where I have weaknesses, she has strengths. Like it just worked out that way. We just got lucky. So like having a number two with those complementary skill sets for us is like really fantastic, like really awesome. And I could see if you took that away and I was like, okay, I got to hire somebody and train somebody and promote them and find that complementary person. That's a big task.
Yeah.
I don't envy that.
Yeah, and that's actually one of my 2025 kind of like maybe 2025, 2026 goals, is to try to figure out who that person could be
Right.
and like what their role could look like. And yeah, because I'm like, I think things are okay, but I just know there's so much stuff that, like, one of my giftings is just breaking things and jumping it, spark plugging into things and lighting
Yeah.
things on fire and stuff.
Yep.
Um,
Well, it's
which,
funny because that's how you and I linked up.
right,
Your strength in just driving action
right,
and being like a little, like you said, a little spark plug, a initiator to do something was something that I don't have as much. Not like I'm lazy. I'll do stuff like,
right.
but like to jump into doing something like a podcast or, going out onto social media more aggressively. That was something that you definitely have in spades. And that I was like, hey, I need this guy. I need this guy to grab on, push me along. And that's been awesome.
I think one of the most helpful things, you mentioned it towards the beginning, and I wrote it down, is as as we implement, I think, a helpful value system, a helpful hierarchy. You said it reduces confusion within the company,
Oh yeah.
so people aren't having to always be wondering what are they gonna
Yeah.
in this situation.
Oh yeah, no, and it's actually huge. And I'll tell our staff people, like when you look at our values, the employee ranks higher than the employee well-being ranks higher than our profitable growth. And what I tell them, what that means is that when faced with these two values head to head, okay, I can choose one or the other. I can choose the employee's well-being, or I can choose profitable company growth. And sometimes you have to make a choice between the two. You're going to
Hmm.
screw one of these things. You know that how I'm going to adjudicate that decision. I'm going to look at that and I'm going to choose the employee well-being. Now, same thing, stability ranks the highest. So if it comes to, hey, there's something that's stability of the company, or I have to fire somebody, I'm going to have to fire somebody because we have to keep the whole thing together and going, right? So
Yep.
the employee's going to lose on that one. Yeah, so it really provides some clarity, and you can, once you know the real values here. I've had employees that will see it in the company, like, oh, that's that decision making, like that's I see where it's built into the structure of how the company's put together, and
Yeah.
that's why I feel like I'm reflecting our true values in a real meaningful way and not just saying a bunch of ethical words. I feel like there's an important distinction there, and especially when you're small companies, I think knowing those values in a true important way is even that much more important, because we don't have a board of directors. We're not sitting there with a bunch of MBAs that are helping us decide things. Like, we need things that really guide us and provide a true north, and integrity, honesty, friendship, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's great, but like, it doesn't really provide much help. Friendship is magic from My Little Ponies. Like, okay, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's and that's why I think part of the reason why we're so tired of the big corporate is because all you see, because it's not their actual hierarchy of values, all you see is nothing but hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Where they put it on the vinyl letters in the conference room,
Right.
and then all their actions go against it. So just, I mean, real quick for the listeners, you got small business owner, they're trying to think through this. Tips for where does somebody even start? Maybe this is kind of a new concept, right? So how do you even start digging in?
This has got to be, and this is where we probably do a part 2. There's got to be a part 2, because I think I have some ideas on that, on like how we observed our behaviors and how we discovered what we really valued. Because sometimes it's a mystery to yourself. Right. You don't really know what you really, really value in real meaningful ways in business. But we'll talk about that. Let's cover that and see if we can provide some of that for people.
Yeah, it's great. And just ran one quick thing off the top is like hearing you say what you are seeing my company's core values as being is actually pretty helpful. Yeah. If you've got somebody who you trust that has been around you for a bit, who's maybe also a good business person, and you could have them like evaluate, not what they should be, but like, when you see my company, what are we making decisions based off of?
Yeah.
Could be a really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, a really good, insightful consultant could be helpful in that if they really know your business. And because sometimes you may be operating under values that you didn't realize were deep down core values that you're operating on, that you may not like and you may not want to recognize as being actually what you value. And being able to sort of recognize that and accept it and go, okay, do I like that? Do I not? I don't like it, but it is one of my values. It's how I've operated, and I want to change that. And I think that's where, like, Pete had mentioned some of that. He recognized he was operating under a value where the quarterly residential services, the urgency overrode everything else. It was more important than employee experience, more important than operational integrity. It was sell this and grow this as fast as we can, and just, damn the torpedoes, as they say, right? And then you have a reckoning if you go that route. So,
yeah, that's great. All right, well, let's do a part 2.
Let's do it. Yeah, awesome, man. And so Pete can show us out now.
Yes.
You've been listening to Coast with Andy, can't pronounce his last name, and Gabe Seymour. Join me, Pete Chopin, probably in another 5 years from now when they invite me on again.